Ash and his Pikachu are two of the most influential Pokemon characters of all time. It's taken Ash a really long time to become the world champion he is today, and in that time, he's gone through a ton of different teams. Some of them are really good, and some others, like the one he uses in Pokémon Black and White, are horrible. That being said, I'm going to attempt to beat Pokémon Black and White using Ash's exact team. Following his team exactly means I'm going to have some single stage Pokemon all the way up to the Elite Four. So yeah, this challenge is going to be extremely difficult. Hey everybody, Future Zango here. I forgot to mention this earlier in the video, but if I ever have to reset, I'm just going to reset to the last important battle just because I do not feel like resetting through the entire game. Just wanted to mention that real quick. Back to the video. With that being said, I'm ready to start this challenge, so I head off and get my starter, which is obviously Pikachu. With this Pikachu, I actually end up losing my first battle against Bianca, but it's fine because it doesn't actually count as a blackout, so I just fight Charon next, beat him, and I'm able to go say bye to my mom. Also, and just like a quick side note, when was the last time Ash talked to his mom? Like, that had to have been a really long time ago, right? Regardless, after walking onto Route 1, I meet up with Bianca again, and she mocks me for having so little Pokemon. I see this as really rude, especially since she knows that I can't get a Pokemon until after I complete the first gym. For this run, I'm gonna make it so that I receive one Pokemon after every gym, just so it's not busted and I have like 6 Pokemon by the second gym battle. Moving on from that though, brings me to Getsis, who is the bane of my existence. You'll be able to see why later. After having to listen to his horrible speech, I fight and beat him in a battle really quickly, then move on to Bianca again. She fights me with her Snivy, but this time I don't actually lose because I'm a little bit over leveled. I do the same thing with Charon, then I'm able to freely move on to the first gym. This first gym battle has me going up against Cress, and he leads the battle with Lillipup. I'm able to outspeed Lillipup and start out by going for a Thunder Shock that does about a third as Lillipup hits me with a bite. This bite kinda stings as it brings me down to 24, and on the next turn I go for another Thunder Shock doing about another third, then Lillipup sets up a workup. Cress then heals in the next turn, but luckily I get 2 high damage rolls in a row, which is enough to finish off Lillipup and bring in the final Pokemon Panpour. Panpour's a water type, so obviously he's a little bit weak to my electric type moves, so a couple of Thunder Shocks are all it takes to take this thing down, and that wins me my first badge. With this first badge, I meet up with the professor, then head over to the Dream Yard. In this Dream Yard, I see Team Plasma doing some questionable things to this Munna, so I end up defeating them in battle and getting some Dream Mist for the professor. After doing that, I'm finally able to leave the first city and move on to Route 3 where I've got some more Team Plasma to deal with. Before catching up with them though, I go into the grass on this route and end up finding myself a Bidoof, which is actually my first Pokemon I can catch. After I catch Bidoof, I chickadee check his nature and see that it's defense up and special defense down, which is kinda mid to be honest, but it's alright. Now I just simply deal with Team Plasma before moving into Nacrene City. In this city, I walk into one of the houses and see the most intense staring contest I've ever seen in my life, then I move out and fight N. This fight goes pretty smoothly, considering my Bidoof is level 19 and his Pokemon are level 13s, so after I defeat him, I'm able to actually challenge the second gym. This fight is me against Lenora, and she starts out with her Herdier as I start with my Pikachu. I start out by going for a Thunder Wave on Herdier, paralyzing the dog as she then hits me with a takedown that brings me all the way down to 1 HP. I then eat my Oran Berry, not like it's gonna matter too much though, and on the next turn I go for an Electro Ball that gets a lucky critical hit which finishes off Herdier. This then leads into the final Pokemon Watchog. With Watchog, I was really debating whether or not I wanted to go for a Thunder Wave, but in the end I decided to go for an Electro Ball because I thought the damage would be more valuable. I wasn't really right about this as Electro Ball only did about a 4th, and then Watchog hit me with a Retaliate which finished off my Pikachu. Thankfully, I ended up getting really lucky though as my static ability activates and it actually paralyzes Watchog for me, so I didn't even need to go for a Thunder Wave. That means now I bring in my Bidoof and start to spam Air Cutter. Unfortunately enough for me, these Air Cutters are doing essentially nothing, which really does suck as I get put to sleep immediately into the battle. Watchog then keeps using Retaliate as I'm sleeping and brings me down to 1 HP, which was really scary. Luckily, after that turn, I end up waking up and getting off a Roost, which allows me to heal up a little bit of HP. On that turn, Watchog got fully paralyzed, and on the next, she also gets fully paralyzed as I set up a Leer to lower her defenses. I heal up with Roost one more time as Watchog then hits me, bringing me down to 27. Now I go for a Quick Attack, doing a good chunk of Watchog's remaining HP, and on that same turn, I unfortunately get put to sleep by a Hypnosis. Now I've just gotta pray I don't get taken down while I'm sleeping, so I start to spam Quick Attack, and eventually I wake up, finishing off Watchog and winning myself my second badge. Now that I've acquired that, I'm able to progress a little bit in this story, and this involves me going outside and meeting up with a ton of Team Plasma. They end up stealing this Dragonite skull for pretty much no reason. I'm not really sure why they took it, but it doesn't matter as I go chase them down in Tingle Forest. Before getting there though, I'm actually able to get another Pokemon. This one's Oshawott, and since it doesn't actually spawn naturally in game, I just gave myself one in the PC. All its IVs and stuff are randomized, so it's fine. My Oshawott ended up with a Quiet Nature, which is I guess okay since my Oshawott is just going to be an Oshawott for the entire game, so maybe speed doesn't matter that much. That being said, after mowing through Team Plasma and Pinwheel Forest, I'm eventually able to get the Dragonite Skull back so I can go into Castelia City. Once I get into Castelia, there's a lot of Team Plasma stuff I gotta deal with, but it doesn't really matter that much as all they've got is level like 18 Sandiles, and because of my new Oshawott, I just kind of sweep. Now that they're finished, I'm actually able to go challenge the third gym leader of this run, Berg, and to get through to his gym, I've got to go through these massive honey-like things. They're really gross going through them, and the noise they make is just ugh. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I actually got a Tranquil after I finished up that second gym battle, and now I'm ready for Berg, and he leads the battle with Whirlipede as I start out with my Tranquil. Against Whirlipede, I start out by going for a workup as Whirlipede goes for a Screech and actually misses. On the second turn, I set up another workup as Whirlipede hits me with a Poison Tail, not doing too much damage at all. On the third turn, we both do the exact same combination of moves, and on the final turn, Whirlipede's alive. I go for an Air Cutter that finishes him off. The next Pokemon to come out is Dwebble, and even at +3, I was a little bit worried I wouldn't be able to one-shot, but I go for my Air Cutter anyways, and I thankfully do. Leavanny's the last Pokemon out, and I've got a 4-time super effective Air Cutter waiting for him, so I just go for that, take him down, and win myself my 3rd gym badge. I'm now allowed 4 Pokemon on my team, and the next Pokemon I get is another one that's in my box, and it's a Tepig. This Tepig's got a serious nature, and it's also able to evolve right away into Pignite. That right there is the only evolution I'm allowed in the Tepig line, so it's gonna get rough. My next big fight is up against Bianca, and at this point, my team is actually kinda good, mainly because her Pokemon are level 18, but we won't talk about that. Immediately after that Bianca fight is a Charon battle that is also just as easy. I'll be honest with you, it was a little bit difficult to deal with the Dua at the beginning of his team, but it's fine because Pikachu has Electro Ball, and Dua ended up missing a Razor Shell. That right there basically ends my fight with Charon, and leads me into Nimbasa City. In Nimbasa, I see this old man getting hounded by Team Plasma, so I go over there, stop them, and he gives me a bike, and boy, does the bike music in this game just slap. My next step in this fun, everlasting journey is to put my pretty Pignite in a skirt and watch Bianca's dreams of becoming a Pokemon master get absolutely derailed by her father. I was absolutely praying her father would take her away, but no, Elisa had to come over here and ruin the entire thing, so I go to her gym and try to fight her. Unfortunately, En's sitting there waiting for me, and he decides to take me on this cute little Ferris wheel ride to calm me down, which, honestly, W-Riz. He then reveals he's the leader of Team Plasma, which is like, dude, how can you do that to me, bruh? I'm forced to defeat him in a battle, and now I'm ready to go fight Elisa for my 4th gym badge. Elisa leads the battle with Emolga as I lead with Pikachu. Emolga ends up going for an Aerial Ace that gets her paralyzed due to my static ability, as I went for a Thunder Wave, but since she's already paralyzed, this move just didn't matter. On the next turn, I do huge damage with an Electro Ball as Emolga gets fully paralyzed. On the next turn, Elisa actually switches out Emolga into Zebstrika, and Zebstrika has Lightning Rod, so when I go for my Electro Ball, it actually brings up his special attack. This is really bad, so I switch out immediately into my Oshawott. On the switch in, Oshawott gets hit by a Flame Charge, and then on the next turn gets taken down by a Spark, as now I move into Tranquil. My Tranquil is able to get off a quick attack before getting taken down by a critical hit Volt Switch. This Volt Switch brings her into another Emolga as I bring in my Pikachu. Pikachu's again able to paralyze with a static ability, so it just makes my Thunder Wave useless. Now I go for that Electro Ball again, which does over half to Emolga as I get hit by an Aerial Ace that takes me down to 9 HP remaining. With that, Emolga then takes down my Pikachu with a quick attack, and I'm basically assuming a reset's gonna come any second now. Just then, I was bestowed by the gods with the luck of a century. Now, we all know this move Rollout. It's got 90 accuracy, and usually it's really not that great of a move. But if you get extremely lucky, this move can actually become one of the strongest in the game. With Pignite, my Rollout didn't hit once, not twice, not even 3 times. It hit 5 times in a row. This thing has a 59% chance of happening, and if it didn't happen this exact way, I wouldn't have won this fight. Thankfully, this fight went the way it did, and I'm able to walk away with my 4th badge. Next up is another fight against Charon, and his team is just kinda underleveled against mine. I was able to get a pretty swift victory against him, and then after beating up a couple of preschoolers, this drawbridge falls down, and what's probably the coolest cutscene on this game. Once I get into Driftvale, I pick out another Pokemon, and this one's my Snivy that actually has a modest nature, which is really solid. Now that I'm here, I can freely go into the cold storage where there's a bunch of Team Plasma just hiding out in this little bunker for actually no reason at all. After freezing up their plans, they actually get arrested and taken to the gym. Getsus then kind of sort of bails them out here, and since there's really nothing left to do in Driftvale, I'm ready to challenge the 5th gym. Clay leads the battle with Krokorok as I lead with Oshawott. With Oshawott, I start out by going for a Razor Shell, which is enough to one-shot Krokorok, as he ended up going for a Torment, doing no damage to me. On the next turn, Clay sends in his ace Pokemon Excadrill, who immediately starts out by going for a Hone Claws. On that same turn, I go for a Revenge, doing about a third, as Excadrill on the next turn, then hits me with a slash that takes me all the way down to 16 HP. To be honest, I kind of figured my Oshawott would die to something like that, but after living, I'm able to get off a Razor Shell, which takes down Excadrill. Now, Clay's onto his final Pokemon Palpitoad, and for this, I simply just switch into Snivy and go for a couple of 4-time super effective grass moves, and that just wins me my 5th badge. Now that I've got the 5th badge, I've got an opportunity at another Pokemon, and this one's in Pinwheel Forest, and it's a Sewaddle. My Sewaddle's got an adamant nature, which is really solid, and I can immediately evolve him into Leavanny. Along with this, I also get myself an Unfezant, and these are 2 of the only 3 Pokemon I'm allowed to fully evolve in this game, so this is just not going to be easy. Now I go to Chargestone Cave, get the TM for Bulldoze, and meet up with N. As usual, nothing he says really matters, except for this one line that he just throws out there. He wants you guys to subscribe. Ayo, hit that red button, please. Moving on further into Chargestone Cave means I get to meet the Nugget brothers, and boy, these guys are sick. They ended up giving me a free nugget, and I can't complain about that, so I just continue on. Here I've got another fight with N, but his team is kind of just all the Pokemon in Chargestone Cave, and since my Pignite is just great with dealing with every single one of them, it's just a sweep. That being said, going into the next city, Mistralton, means I've got to go search for Skyla in the Celestial Tower place. I don't know if y'all knew this, but if you walk through this area while pressing B, you actually change the way these guys are facing, which can be really useful when you go through this area. Regardless of that though, once I make it to the top of the tower, Skyla just leaves, and now I'm just ready to go to the gym. In this gym, I slam my face against a couple of walls using these massive cannons, and now I'm ready to fight Skyla. She leads the battle with Swoobat as I lead with Oshawott. Swoobat starts out by hitting me with an acrobatics that brings me down to 35 as I go for an Aqua Tail, doing about half to her. I know I'm gonna die here, so I just go for an Aqua Jet, bring Swoobat down into healing range, as then I get taken down by another acrobatics. With that, I switch in my Pikachu, and Skyla heals with a Hyper Potion, but this Hyper Potion doesn't matter at all as my Thunderbolt's able to one-shot the Swoobat. The next Pokemon to come in is Unfezant, and I outspeed Unfezant, and I'm able to go for another Thunderbolt, which also takes down this bird. The final Pokemon out is Swanna, and Swanna outspeeds me, but doesn't get off a useful move before I go for a 4-time super effective Thunderbolt that finishes off Swanna and wins me my battle against Skyla. That gym right there was even easier than the last, and it allows me to progress in the story. But before I do that though, I go back to an older area where I can find myself a Roggenrola. This Roggenrola I immediately evolve into Boldore, then I check out its nature, and it's Brave, which is kind of just okay. I would like to have a little bit of a higher speed stat, but it's okay, it's whatever. Now I go to talk to my mom for the first time in years and swiftly hang up on her so I can battle Charon. This fight with Charon goes swimmingly. I think I have a super effective move for every single Pokemon on his team, so it just ended up being a complete sweep. I get to go to Twist Mountain now, and in this mountain there's a ton of Team Plasma shenanigans, but it doesn't really matter too much as they're kind of just little weaklings. I didn't even really mean to say that, but they are weaklings, so I don't even really feel bad about it. After dominating them, they run into the next city, I follow them, and in this city, I can challenge the 7th gym leader. Bryson leads the battle with Vanillish as I lead with Pignite. Vanillish starts out by going for an Acid Armor, raising his defense by 2 stages, but since I go for a Flamethrower that's a special attacking move, I'm still able to one-shot. The next Pokemon to come out is Beartic, and for this, I started by going for a Flamethrower, doing a little bit over half as he then hits me with a Brine. This Brine takes me down to 81, and on the next turn I take him down with another Flamethrower. Last out is Cryogonal, and he actually outspeeds me and starts out by going for an Aurora Beam, but since this does almost no damage to me, I'm able to go for a single Flame Charge, finishing off this stupid Snowflake and winning myself my 7th badge. Next up is time to go through Dragon Spiral Tower and fight literally everybody in Team Plasma. Okay, maybe not literally, but I fight a ton of people in here. I mean, look at them, they're literally ganging up on me. Eventually I make it all the way to the top, and then I see N. He flies away, so I've got to go all the way back down. This all leads me on to the next place I've got to go, which is the Desert Resort. While I'm here, I can actually get a Pokemon, and this one's a Sandile. Before retrieving Sandile from the box, I decide to go all the way down into Relic Castle to talk to Getsis. He easily escapes us by simply just shoving me aside, as after that, I've got to fight with Bianca. Bianca Stoutland goes down to a Leaf Blade, her Superior to an X-Scissor, her Musharna to another X-Scissor, and her final Pokemon gets taken out by another Leaf Blade from my Leavanny. That right there finishes my final rival battle with Bianca, and leads me onto some more story with Getsis, where he's just spewing some more ugly propaganda. That being said, now that I'm inside Opelucid, I take my Sandile out of the box and check out his nature, and its defense up, speed down, which is just horrible. I do have that Moxie ability though, so it'll help out a little bit in the Elite Four, but still, having that speed down is awful. That being said, I evolve my Sandile all the way up to Crocodile, and this is the final full evolution I'll have on my team for the rest of the game. With that, I organize my team a little bit before going into my fight with Gym Leader Drayden. He leads his battle with Fracture as I I lead with my Crocodile. I start with a Crunch that lowers Fracture's defense and does a little bit over half, as Fracture then sets up a Dragon Dance. On the next turn, Fracture decides to completely waste his Dragon Dance by going for a Dragon Rage, doing only 40 damage to me, as then I'm able to finish him off with another Crunch. With that, I go up to +1, as the next Pokemon to come out is Druddigon, who also gets hit by a Crunch on the first turn, and this does over half. On that same turn, I get hit by a Night Slash that takes me down to 69. Nice. And then on the next, Druddigon gets taken out by a second Crunch. This means going into Drayden's final Pokemon Haxorus, I'm at +2. Being at +2 means when I go for a Crunch on Haxorus, I bring him down to exactly 1 HP remaining. While doing this, I also bring his defense down 1 stage, as he then hits me with a Dragon Tail, which forcefully switches my Crocodile out. This is honestly perfectly fine by me though, as my Unfezant can pretty easily deal with Haxorus, and after a couple of flies and a couple of quick attacks, Haxorus goes down and I win my final badge. Now, all I've got left to do in this game is the Elite Four, so I start my journey towards that. On my way there, I've got my final fight against Charon, and he leads with Unfezant as I lead with Bulldor. As you can imagine, Unfezant doesn't really fare well against my rock type, so he gets taken down, and the next Pokemon, Samurott, comes in. Samurott takes out Bulldor, but then my Leavanny comes in and finishes off Samurott on the next turn. Now, all that's left is Simisear and Liepard, and since both of these Pokemon really aren't that great, I won't bore you with the details, but eventually they go down. With that, Charon's finished, and I continue my journey towards Victory Road. Once I get to Victory Road, I go through it pretty quickly as it's not really that long in this game, and I'm ready to pretty much challenge the Elite Four now. Before going into my first Elite Four battle with Chantal, I decided to take a look at my team, and it's Bulldor, Leavanny, Unfezant, Crocodile, Pignite, and Pikachu. In total, I've only got 3 full evolutions on my team, so this is gonna go great. Regardless of all that though, this is the team I'm gonna take into my first Elite Four fight with Chantal. I lead this battle with Bulldor, as Chantal leads with Cofagrigus. I start out by trying to hit a Stone Edge with Bulldor, but I actually end up missing, as I then get hit by a Shadow Ball that brings me down to 51 and lowers my special defense. On the next turn, my Bulldor does not outspeed and gets taken up by another Shadow Ball, as now I just decide to bring in Pikachu. With Pikachu, I start out by going for a Light Screen, as I then get hit by a Shadow Ball that doesn't do as much as it usually would have, and it only brings me down to 64. On the next turn, I decide to go for a Thunderbolt, doing a little under a third, as I then get hit by a Will-O-Wisp. Instead of going for a second Thunderbolt, I just decide to switch out with a Volt Switch. This brings me into my next Pokemon, Crocodile, who gets hit by a Shadow Ball on the switch in, doing minimal damage, but it does lower my special defense. On the next turn, I go for a Crunch, which finishes off Cofagrigus, but it does not activate my Moxie ability, as unfortunately, I get Cofagrigus' ability, which is Mummy. The next Pokemon in is Jellicent, and for this, I started by going for a Crunch, which I assumed would just kill, but it actually doesn't, and it leaves Jellicent with a Sliver. Jellicent then hits me with a Surf that brings me down to 48 HP, as 2 more Crunches later, Jellicent goes down. With this, Chantal sends in Golurk, and for Golurk, I decide to switch out into Pikachu as essentially just a sacrifice, because I cannot have my Crocodile go down yet. This sacrifice play allows me to get a free switch into Leavanny, and with Leavanny I started by going for a Leaf Blade that unfortunately doesn't actually kill Golurk. Thankfully, Golurk isn't actually able to take me out with anything here, so he just full restores in the next turn, and I'm eventually able to take him down. Now that means I'm onto Chantal's final Pokemon, Chandelure, and this is a really hard Pokemon to deal with. With Chandelure, my Leavanny does essentially no damage, so she just ends up going down to a Fire Blast, and on the next turn I bring in my Crocodile hoping I will outspeed. To be honest, I really thought I would outspeed, but my nature and IVs are horrible, so that means I actually don't. This allows Chandelure to actually take me down, and with that falls the rest of my team. That right there ends up being my first reset, which kinda sucks. I would have rather had it be none at all, but whatever. Looking back over this battle, I generate a little bit of a better plan and go back into it leading with Unfezant. My Unfezant is pretty useful in this fight, and using it right at the start of the battle means I can get off 2 flies before Cofagrigus can kill me. That being said, after getting off my 2 flies, Cofagrigus is about at a 5th remaining, as my Unfezant ends up going down to a Psychic. With that, the next Pokemon I send in is Bulldor, and with Bulldor I start up by going for a Stone Edge, hoping to hit, and thankfully it actually does, and it brings Cofagrigus to almost half. On the next turn I get hit by Shadow Ball, doing a good bit of damage to me, as I then go for a Bulldoze just so I can outspeed on the following turn. After outspeeding, I go for a Stealth Rock, then Cofagrigus takes out Bulldor, but he did everything he needed to do, so I'm not really that pressed about it. Now I get to send in my Pikachu to set up a Light Screen and bait out Chantal's final full restore. Once my Pikachu gets a bit low after spamming a ton of Thunderbolts, I decide to switch out into Leavanny. With Leavanny, a Leaf Blade takes Cofagrigus down and brings out the next Pokemon, Chandelure. For this, I switch out into Pignite, who tanks a Fire Blast on the switch in, and on the next turn I try to kill Chandelure, but it's no use as I just go down. This is honestly a-okay though, as it gives me a free switch into Crocodile, who has Crunch and actually has enough HP to survive a Fire Blast. This allows me to freely take out Chandelure and also get a Moxie boost for the rest of the Pokemon. With this Moxie boost, I'm able to one-shot Jellicent, who comes out next, and the final Pokemon Golurk, I just switch into Leavanny and destroy him with a Leaf Blade, and that wins me my first Elite Four battle. For my next fight, I elect to go up against Caitlyn, and she leads the battle with Ranunculus as I lead with Pikachu. With Pikachu, I set up a light screen, as then Ranunculus hits me with a Psychic that brings me all the way down to 40. On the next turn, I figure Ranunculus is probably going to go for another Psychic, so I go for a Volt Switch into my Crocodile just so I don't get hit by it, and she actually goes for a Focus Blast. Luckily, this does not connect, as on the next turn I go for a Crunch that honestly should have killed Ranunculus, but I got a low damage roll, so it actually doesn't. On that same turn, Ranunculus actually connects with a Focus Blast, but it only brings me down to 75 due to the light screen. Now, with a couple more crunches, Ranunculus goes down and leads into the next Pokemon, Sigilyph. Sigilyph might have been able to take me out with an Ice Beam here, but for some reason she decided to go for a Psychic, so I just end up killing with Crunch. At this point, I'm at +2, and nothing else on her team outspeeds me, so I'm able to just kind of sweep the rest of her team. That ends up winning me my second battle, and for my third, I go up against Grimsley. With Grimsley, I lead with my Unfezant, as he leads with Scrafty. I start out by going for a Fly, and when I eventually land, I get a critical hit on Scrafty that's able to knock him out. Next up, Grimsley sends in his Crocodile, and he starts out by going for a Foul Play, as I then go for a Feather Dance. Unfortunately, Foul Play is based off of my attack stats, so that Feather Dance really didn't do much, as in the next turn I decide to go for a Fly, doing about a third. Unfortunately for Crocodile, he hits me with yet another Foul Play, but I actually don't get taken out, so I'm able to hit another Fly and bring him down to about a third remaining. Now I send in my Leavanny and go for a Leaf Blade that's enough to take out Crocodile and bring in the next Pokemon, Liepard. Unfortunately, Liepard outspeeds me and hits an Aerial Ace, killing my Leavanny, and that just brings in my Crocodile. With Crocodile, I go for a Dig that brings Liepard down to about a fourth remaining, and then Grimsley just full restores. I then get to go for yet another Dig, hitting Liepard for about 2/3, as on the next turn, I just finish her off with a Crunch. With that, I'm at +1, and Grimsley's onto his final Pokemon, Bisharp, so I can just get off a clean Dig here. That's what I thought before I realized Bisharp outspeeds me and hits me with a super effective X-Scissor. This X-Scissor brings me down to 1 HP remaining, and then that Dig gets off, finishes off Bisharp, and leads me to my final Elite Four battle against Marshall. Against Marshall, I lead with my Unfezant yet again, as he leads with Throw. With Unfezant, I start with a Fly, doing over half, as Throw then hits me with a Stone Edge that does a lot of damage, brings me all the way down to 51. On the next turn, another Fly takes down Throw, and leads into the next Pokemon, Sawk. Sawk has Sturdy, so kind of really annoying to deal with. I decide to go for a Fly, and it immediately activates that Sturdy ability, as when I land, he actually ends up missing his attack. I actually probably could have killed Sawk here if I went for a Quick Attack rather than going for another Fly, but for some reason, I decided to go for yet another Fly, as Sawk just heals up and gets brought down into Sturdy yet again. Unfortunately for me, Lightning doesn't strike twice, as I can't avoid another Stone Edge, and Unfezant gets taken down. I'm still not necessarily in a bad position though, as I have 5 Pokemon remaining, and Sawk is at 1 HP. So now I move into Pikachu and go for a Thunderbolt, finishing off Sawk's remaining HP and leading into the third Pokemon, Conkeldurr. Conkeldurr's really beefy and hits extremely hard, so I like to go for a Thunderbolt, as I then get hit by a Hammer Arm that just destroys my Pikachu. So now I'm on to my third Pokemon, which is Pignite, and once I send in Pignite, I like to go for a Flamethrower in the first turn that does about a third to Conkeldurr, as he then hits me with a Hammer Arm. This Hammer Arm does massive damage, but it doesn't kill Pignite, as it brings me down to 4 remaining. Now that I've survived that, I'm able to go for a Flamethrower in the next turn, finishing off Conkeldurr and leading into the final Pokemon, Mienshao. To be honest with you, Mienshao is just kind of outclassed here, as it's a 1v4, so eventually, after a couple of mons, I end up taking this thing down and winning myself my final Elite Four battle. We're in the end game now, as I've got to go up against Team Plasma, and these fights are going to be very, very difficult. After Team Plasma absolutely wrecks the Champion's Palace and makes their own giant castle type thing, I've got to go storm into there and try to defeat N and Ghetsis. N has a Zekrom, but to be honest, that's not even what I'm worried about. Ghetsis' team is amazing. Not only does he have an illegal level 54 Hydreigon, but his team just surrounding the Hydreigon is crazy stupid. Regardless, before we get to that, we've got to fight N, and to get to him, I've got to go through this massive cutscene that's honestly pretty cool. With all of that being said, N leads the battle with Zekrom, as I lead with Crocodile. My Crocodile is a major counter to this thing, as right away I go for a Dig, doing exactly half to Zekrom. On the turn after I come up from the ground, Zekrom goes for a Giga Impact, but luckily I actually avoid it. This allows me to get off yet another free Dig, finishing off Zekrom and leading into the next Pokemon, Vanillux. Even with my Moxie boost, Vanillux is really tanky, so I decided to just switch out into Boldore. Boldore gets hit by a Blizzard and gets immediately brought down down to 1 HP. Boldore then gets finished off by a flash cannon, as now I bring in my Pikachu and set up a light screen as I get hit by a blizzard, bringing me down to 33 and freezing me. With my Pikachu being frozen solid, I don't actually get off my first Volt Switch, but on the next turn I'm able to finally get it off and switch out into Pignite. With Pignite in, I elect to go for a head smash that is enough to finish off the Vanillux, and it does give me a lot of recoil damage, but I'm honestly okay with that. Gyaracosta now gets sent in, and for this I started by going for a Bulldoze just to lower his speed a little bit before sending in my Leavanny, and once Leavanny gets sent in, a Leaf Blade's enough to take him down. The next Pokemon to get sent in is Klinklang, but it's actually not Klinklang, it's a Zoroark, but for some reason I didn't actually compute that, so I thought this was a Klinklang the entire time. Because it's a Zoroark, I get hit by a Flamethrower, and it ends up taking down my Leavanny. I then switch into Pikachu thinking Pikachu's gonna outspeed Klinklang, and I was wrong, because again, it's not a Klinklang, and my Pikachu gets taken down by another Flamethrower. I'm now on to my second to last Pokemon, which is Krookodile. With Krookodile, I started by going for a Torment, because my move Dig is really bad. While I was going for that Torment, Zoroark missed a Focus Blast, and on the next turn, because I went for that Torment, he can't actually use Focus Blast again, so he's forced to hit me with a Retaliate. I then go for a Dig, and while I'm underground, he actually goes for a Focus Blast, and when I come back up from the ground, he can't actually hit me with another Focus Blast, so he's forced to go for Retaliate. This entire cycle is kind of like a cat and mouse game, but eventually Zoroark goes down and leads into the second to last Pokemon, Klinklang. At +1, Dig is enough to finish off Klinklang with a one-shot, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Arceus. Arceus is faster than me, but actually ends up missing a Stone Edge, so it doesn't really matter as I hit a Crunch, and it brings Arceus down to 1 HP remaining. At this point, N decides to use a Full Restore, but it really doesn't matter as Arceus is at -1 defense, so one more Crunch is enough to take the Big Bird down and win my fight against N. With that, I've got one more fight remaining in this game, and it's actually the hardest, up against Getsis. My first attempt against him went a little something like this. I was able to take out his first Pokemon, Cofagrigus, with ease, no problems there. The problem comes immediately after when he sends in his illegal Hydreigon. This thing has Fire Blast, Focus Blast, Surf, and Dragon Pulse, which essentially covers every type in this game. Considering my Pokemon are level 50s, I kinda just got swept by the Hydreigon. That being said, my second attempt went a little bit better. Rather than being level 50, I decided to bring all of my Pokemon up to level 52 and retry the fight. Along with this, I also replaced my Boldore because this thing was essentially useless in the entire fight, so I just replaced it for Snivy. I actually ended up getting past his illegal Hydreigon, but only because he missed a Fire Blast. The real problem came a little bit later into the fight when I made a horrendous blunder. Rather than swapping out and taking out Seismitoad with a ×4 grass type move, I decided to stay in and go for an Earthquake because I thought I was at +2, so it would just kill. I was wrong. Seismitoad actually ended up surviving the attack and taking out my Krookodile, so I couldn't actually deal with a few of his later Pokemon, so I just kinda lost the fight. That being said, for this third fight, I decided to take it just a little bit more seriously, and I brought my team up to the level cap of 54. I accidentally overleveled my Snivy, but it doesn't matter because it's Snivy, so don't worry about it. That being said, Getsis leads this fight with Cofagrigus as I lead with my Krookodile. I started by going for a Crunch, dealing massive damage to Cofagrigus, bringing him down to about a third remaining as he then misses a Toxic. That being said, on the next turn, I can finish him off with a Crunch as this brings in the second Pokemon, Hydreigon. Against Hydreigon, I don't outspeed, so the first thing I attempt to do is go for a Scary Face, and thankfully I'm able to get it off because Hydreigon misses a Focus Blast. Now that I know he's going to go for another Focus Blast, I elect to switch into my Leavanny, who's just going to take not very effective damage, but he actually ends up missing again. Now with Leavanny actually outspeeding, I'm able to go for an X-Scissor that brings Hydreigon into the red. Hydreigon then finally lands an attack on my Leavanny, being a 4-time super effective Fire Blast that just incinerates my poor Pokemon. I know Hydreigon's gonna heal in the next turn, so I bring in my Pignite. The reason I did this was to go for a couple of Head Smashes, as these do pretty big damage. I ended up being pretty right with this, as 2 Head Smashes brings Hydreigon down to about a third remaining, as then he ends up taking out my Pignite with a Surf. Pignite did everything he needed to do though, as now I get a free switch into Unpheasant, and I'm able to go for a Fly, finishing off Hydreigon. With that comes Bisharp, and for Bisharp I move into Krookodile. Bisharp goes for a Stone Edge, but I avoid it, and on the next turn I'm able to hit an Earthquake cleanly, and it ends up taking down Bisharp. Now the next Pokemon to come in is Seismitoad, and for this I don't make the same mistake twice, and I decide to switch out into Snivy. On the switch in, Snivy gets hit for 0 damage as Seismitoad elected to go for a Rain Dance. On the next turn I outspeed, and with my Giga Drain being 4 times super effective, Seismitoad is just annihilated. After draining the life out of that stupid frog, I'm onto the second to last Pokemon, Electros. Electros is a really slow Pokemon, so my Snivy actually outspeeds here, but but since I'm not going to do any big damage, I decided to just set up a Leech Seed. Once my Snivy gets taken down, I get a free switch in Crocodile. With Crocodile, I go for a Crunch, doing nearly half as Electros hits me with an Acrobatics, bringing me down to 116. Now this is where the Leech Seed gets really clutch, as this Leech Seed gives me just enough damage so on the next turn I can actually finish off Electros with another Crunch. That Leech Seed was so clutch, as now I don't have to risk a crit or anything like that going into Ghetsis' final Pokemon, Bouffalant. Against Bouffalant, I go for an Earthquake that doesn't kill, as I then get hit by a Head Charge that takes me down. To be honest with you, this doesn't really matter at all though, as I have 2 remaining Pokemon, and I just switch into Unpheasant and go for a simple Quick Attack, finishing off Bouffalant, and finally winning me this run. This entire challenge was one of the most difficult ones I've ever done. I mean, there was so much planning in every single battle, and this Elite Four was absolutely dreadful, especially with the Ghetsis fights. With that all being said though, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It took a ton of time to make, and if you did enjoy, if you could please consider leaving a like and subscribing, that would really help me out. Again, thank you all for watching, and that was my attempt at a Pokemon Black and White run as Ash.